And this is about the senior seminar, but if anybody has questions about Trinity, Karen and Lizzie and Andy and I would be happy to tell you about what's going on around here. In addition to all the kids, we have a lot of ministry programs going on. So anyway, welcome to Trinity. Would you allow me to say a word of blessing over our meal and our time together? Let's pray. Faithful God, we give you our thanks and our praise for this day. And despite the gloomy weather, we know that there is light because you are with us. And so we ask your blessing upon our time together today. We thank you for the food, and we ask that you will use it to strengthen our bodies so that we might serve you more fully. We pray that all that we do and say today might be to your glory as we have gathered, and we pray in your name. Amen. So have a great morning, and welcome to Trinity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Neil. I'm Lizzie Conroy, and I am going to introduce our speaker, Janina DiVittorio. She is an expert on all things senior living and really has one of the biggest hearts of service that I've ever met in my whole life. And so you do, you really do. So Janina DiVittorio, she has a background in banking, medical sales, residential real estate, and of course senior living, where her heart truly is. She resides in Alexandria with her husband, Michael, and has a daughter who is now 17 and is a junior at Trinity School at Meadowview in Falls Church. And she's very involved with the school and with her church, Alders Gate United Methodist in Alexandria. She enjoys fine wine and tea and good conversation, traveling to interesting places, reading, public speaking, healthy meals, and spending quality time with her friends and family. She is proud and delighted to be on the great team at Grand Oaks, and she focuses her efforts on cultivating relationships with community partners and educating them on the community. She is passionate about the lives of seniors who are our most valuable citizens. So thank you, Janina. Thank you.
Wow, I hope I can live up to that, Lizzie. I'm happy to be back at Trinity, and I'm not going to lie, I love the Methodist Church. I'm a Methodist PK, and it feels very much at home to be eating in a fellowship space in the Methodist Church, which I've done my whole life. And I would add to the pastor's comments, I love the sound of children, even though I know we all want to focus here, because when you have no signs of children in your church, you have the sign of a dying church. So I know things are happening here at Trinity, and that makes me very happy. Were any of you at my talk or our talk, our time together in 2020? Good. I want this to be interactive, and I will follow Karen's direction on speaking to you. And I first want to tell you that I am an evangelist for aging enthusiastically. Growing old is a privilege denied to many. And we want to talk about senior housing today, and I want to operate under the premise, and I want you to know, and I want you to go and visit places and understand that we make these moves to live, not to die. Yes, I said the D word. We must normalize talking about that. We want to make our dash count, and we want to do it enthusiastically, and I want to tell you that you live in a great place to grow older. There are many options here. So many that it can become mind-boggling. Within a 5-mile radius of the building where I hang my hat, there are 4 new communities going up. So I would invite you to get on Google and look around and see and go and normalize checking out the digs, because it's a healthy thing to do that we want to do proactively And we don't want to do it when we're off the stress-o-meter, to quote Karen Briscoe. We want to do it when we have control and we have say-so, and we are able to articulate and help others around us understand where we want to go. And might I add, it is about you, but it is also about your children and about the people who care for you. And they should be involved in the conversation as well. And if there is anyone here, because I know someone called out who was going to come and actually had to go and attend to an aging father who was ill, I'm happy to have those conversations. We will not cover all the bases today. I have my cards here. I want you to reach out to me, and I am very happy that the HBC group has the foresight to do this. And I entertained a number of people who called and had conversations with me after we did this the last time. And I want to make sure that if you don't get some FaceTime with me today, or you think of questions later, I want you to reach out to me. So, again, I'm about aging enthusiastically. Let me ask this question. I work for Johns Hopkins Medicine, who owns Sibley Memorial Hospital on the property where my building, Grand Oaks, is and has been for 22 plus years. So I work in medicine, and I'm very proud to work for Hopkins. It's a great organization that has been certainly highlighted during the pandemic. Does anybody know in medicine how we define geriatric? What age is geriatric? Does anybody know? 65. I'm 58. So, David Bowie said, aging is an extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. So, maybe things don't feel like they used to when you climb the stairs, when you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, but I'm here to tell you we're living longer. Medicine is better. Is that always a good thing? No. But we are doing a lot of studies about longevity and living longer, but more importantly, living better. Correct? As soon as you feel too old to do a thing, do it. So, I really get excited about aging and helping people do it well. And so sometimes I'm going to make the premise that your home, where you have been for a long time, perhaps raised your children, or you have made a move to right size, is the new term, right, Ada? Instead of downsize, it's right size. And it is something we all need to do, even if we are staying within that dwelling for a while. Again, about being proactive to make your house safer, and go ahead and be proactive about life changing. So, we consider making moves out of our current home because we want to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. Correct? And one thing I learned, I have worked in all levels of care except for skilled nursing. However, I worked in medical sales, as Lizzie said, and so I know enough to make me dangerous about the practice of medicine and what happens as we age in the acute care setting. So I've seen, and I collaborate with people who are in the skilled nursing space. But what I want to tell you is a little story about a gentleman whose care manager, and that is listed on your resource list that I have put in your folders. We'll look at that maybe a little bit later. And after you leave, you have time, some links where you can go. The care manager called me and said to me, Janina, I need to tell you that I have a client who's very sick at George Washington, and he is 92 years old, and to say that aesthetics are important to him is an understatement. Okay, tell me more. Renowned architect in Washington, D.C., and I won't go any further because Washington is a very small town. And she said he has a stereotype in his brain, and I want to see what you think about it. His mother, who was in her 90s, had to move to a nursing home, and he has sworn, vowed, and declared that he would never do this. And if you tell me you've never had this thought in your head, then I'll disagree with you. So I said to her, you know my building, you know that it does not look or feel or taste like skilled nursing. Well, lucky for this gentleman, he was very ill. He really did not have a plan in place, and he passed on. Good for him. And I mean that sincerely. So he kind of passed the window. So this is why I want you to visit places, and I want you to go and see what independent living is. We'll talk about that. So we'll kind of start at the top, and then we'll go on to assisted living. I am not an expert in skilled care. If you have any questions about that, we can have an offline conversation, and I can point you to people who are more knowledgeable in skilled care. So, independent living, and it's really interesting that we're in McLean because there's a lot going on in independent living in McLean. We have Vincent Hall, and what else do we have coming? Huge structure, very high-end, company based in Chicago. Perhaps you know friends who have looked there, or maybe you've looked there. It's called The Mather. So I will tell you from our very close-knit industry folks that it is 80% sold. Yes. I have a good friend who used to be my right arm at Grand Oaks who has now gone to work for them, and so they are doing a great job. So, you know, if you think because of the pandemic that people are not making moves like this, you're wrong. So they have a very unique model, and I'm not an expert on it. I know more about a model like Vincent Hall. So you buy a membership, if you will, and you save a space, and they put you on a waiting list. So what has changed, and I'm not going to focus on the pandemic or anything clinical about it. I want to talk about what it's done to us sociologically and what we've learned about ourselves as human beings. I worked for the Fairfax near Fort Belvoir, which is very similar to Vincent Hall, but it was founded by an organization of Army officers. And I really, really like the model. And I often have people call and ask me about their parents. And my friend Melissa, whom I worked with at Bank of America in Washington when I first moved here, called me and said, Janina, my mother has just called me and told me that my parents have a deposit down at this, it's called a CCRC, a Continuing Care Retirement Community. And their plan is that they will move there when one of them is not able to care for the other. How do you feel about that? I said, do you want me to answer you honestly? I don't like that. That plan stinks. So, what we have done is people wait too long. You're going to pay a hefty community fee to a continuing care retirement community, which is a big number that you pay, and that community vows to you that they are going to take care of you regardless of your health status for the rest of your life. There are tax advantages to making such a payment and purchasing such a contract. And many people at the Fairfax, whom I know personally that I helped move in, did that because of the big tax break they got after they paid that move-in or community fee. Excuse me, Uncle Sam sees that a portion of that is considered major medical. And so you would need to go talk to your own individual advisor about what that would mean for you. Is this all about taxes? No. But what I observed at the Fairfax and military communities now, where we are after what we have been through, are more open than they used to be, because there are caveats in their contracts where if they do not fill their space with the traditional profile of a resident, retired military, government service, then they may rent it to whomever they want. Now, I think there are cultural ramifications of that. If you're not used to being around that, these people have a shared experience, and they have things in common that connect them socially. So, I don't know, where each of you are, and I'd be happy to talk to you, what I think about a culture that comes from this space because of where we live. What I saw on my tours, when people would come in to visit, they would say to me, Janina, you said you're selling independent living, and I don't see any independent people around here. You know why? Because they're out doing their thing. They're at Trinity. They're at their church. They're at Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria. They're over at Fort Belvoir shopping. They're here in McLean. They're at the Starna having coffee with friends. That is why you move to independent living. You move in there while you got miles left, so that you are going to maximize that big number that you're going to spend. And where you have connections with people. Now, this is where I get really excited. We know now, after what we are still going through in the pandemic, and we have made progress, that the untold story is about isolation. So if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember this. There was an article in the WAPO not long ago says if you want to live longer, hang out with your friends. It's a wonderful article. Yes, it is. Go read it. Go hang out with your friends. So also, the Consumer Electronics Show is all about all the things that help keep us as independent as possible, as long as possible. Technology is absolutely exploding with things that help keep us engaged. It's about engagement. There's a study that was quoted by the president of the AARP. And they did a huge sponsorship at the Consumer Electronics Show on these things I'm referring to. And we know that people who remain engaged live 7 to 8 years longer. And we live healthier because we're engaged and we hang out with our friends. So in my community, what I learned is that during the pandemic, I could not get out and market. And anyone in the room who knows me knows that I am a super people person. That sounds very cliche-ish, but it is true. I was given the privilege to put my running shoes on, literally, and my khakis and my golf shirt from Grand Oaks, and help out. And I had some of the best human experiences I've ever had. What I saw was difficult to observe, in that we had quarantines, we had isolations, and people had to be in their apartments. And I noticed that even the introverts whom I know who go to the dining room and say, I would like to sit by myself and have my dinner, they interact with their waiter, and that is great. And they go back to their apartment. They might say hello to a few people on the way in and on the way out, but they really want to sit by themselves, and we don't force them to sit with people. It is not a club. You are not joining a club when you move into a community. You still have your own life, and if you are an introvert, you remain an introvert, and if you are an extrovert, you remain an extrovert. But what I learned is that at least 3 times a day in a community, you have an opportunity to go to the dining room and interact with people. Even based on the scenario I just painted for you by someone who wants to sit alone. But what we know is that activity going on around us, and I call it scaffolding activity, where we can see it and we can hear it, even if we're not talking to people, is life-giving. And when we live at home, and mobility becomes less. And I'm not trying to be negative. It happens when we get older. Just had a conversation with my 90-year-old father-in-law about driving his car. And he is Italian and very animated, and so am I. So it was an interesting conversation, and I get it. But you need to be in a place where that is available to you and it is easier to you, because it is harder to create that in your own home. All right? So, independent living, make the move early so that you can enjoy it. And I used to say at the Fairfax, what is worth its weight in gold is that maintenance agreement you had. You dial extension 4545 and you speak and say, hey, you know what? I'm getting ready to go to Great Falls and go out to my daughters for dinner. And you know what? My toilet is a little bit sluggish. Can you come take a look at that? That's great. Mrs. DiVittorio will take care of it. You have a good time while you're gone. Did you hear what I just said? We want to spend our time continuing to enjoy life and making memories and not worrying about the punch list and arguing with our children about it. You know what I'm talking about. Those are the things. So it's about quality of life. But let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of an independent living community. Has anybody looked into, you don't have to raise your hand, looked into an independent living community, looked at the Mather, looked at Vincent Hall, or any other community? They're all over the place. There is a new one going up on MacArthur Boulevard where the old Safeway used to be. Independent living, assisted living, and memory care. They're moving, what does this tell you? They're headquartered in Colorado, and they're moving to upper Northwest DC to put a building down because they've done their research, and through Trammell Crow they have found out that, people have means, and this is a great place to go. Their fees are pretty high, even based on our own scales. But you pay a community fee, and then that enables you to know that you will be taken care of regardless of your status. And the maintenance and the upkeep of your apartment or your cottage is not your problem. So you pay that fee, then you may go, then there's assisted living, and then there's skilled care, and then there's memory care. Now the new model of a CCRC is independent, assisted, and memory care. Skilled nursing is staying more independent or isolated, if you will. So I think it's a really great model. Do you have to go into one that has a culture type flavor to it, military or government? No. My husband has clearly let me know that he loves the model, but he does not. He's retired from the Air Force, but he does not want to be with a bunch of retired military people.
Question?
Yes.
Is there a health requirement to be able to enter some of these places?
Good question. No, there's actually not. And one thing I want to demystify, and I think we've gotten better at this, but I hear it occasionally, is do I have to be able to walk in No. No, and at the Fairfax, let me step back. Every contract at a CCRC is different. And I know at the Fairfax, and I'm not selling them, but I work there, I'm speaking from a place of experience. It's a stellar contract, and you will want to get an elder care attorney to review your contract for you. That is a good move. Make sure. And some of you may have worked in contracts and you feel perfectly fine reading through it yourself, but it's always a good idea to get a second set of professional eyes. What it can do, Karen, and again, speaking to doing this early, at the Fairfax, and I won't go down this rabbit hole, and I'm happy to have this conversation if any of you have concerns about memory care or dementia in your life, for yourself or one of your friends or anybody in your family. But we had a caveat there. We had you would get an examination by your doctor, and if it was not deemed that you had any dementia or significant cognitive challenge, the rate you would pay in skilled nursing later was less, significantly less. So remember what I told you my friend Melissa did? She called me and she said, my mom and dad have agreed that when one of them can't take care of the other, that's when they're gonna move. And I'm like, no. Because caregiving is strenuous. And I believe that when you move into a community, here's another point, you should do it together. If you've been married to someone for many years, you've been making decisions for many years together, the best way to make this decision is together. Right? And that way, your spouse knows that if something happens, you are situated. Because making a move after, in my opinion, here, and I'm going to say the D word again, after the shoe drops, let's put it that way, is not a great time to make it. Case in point, I had a wonderful retired cardiologist who moved to Grand Oaks, and his wife kept telling us, we're going to move, and all of a sudden, the calls went dark. And I said to my colleague, something has happened. I'm going to call the son. Yes, my mom passed away, so now my dad is coming, and he's coming in 3 weeks, and I'm like, yikes. So he moved in, and it was very hard for him because he was trying to make this transition in his life without the presence of his wife, and he was moving into a new domicile. And he told me after the fact, Janina, I really didn't have time to grieve. And it wasn't a good time, and I so now wish that we moved in together. Because we've been doing everything. She was my partner in all things, he said. So, what I think has happened, to be quite honest with you, with this big push, and I am all about the villages, and you have a great one in McLean. It's in your folder. And one of the founders is our good friend, Kay Heiberg Ransford. Colleen, you helped found this. So the villages DC has the largest concentration of villages in the United States. And a village is an organization, and they're all structured differently to help you stay in your house as long as possible. And that's a great thing. What I see is that people need to they can push the boundaries of what the village was created for. So I have a good friend, Barbara Scott, who's a caseworker in DC. She contracts with like 5 villages, and they are working her ragged and they're pushing the boundaries. So I actually had a conversation with some of my village friends and said, you guys have got to start speaking up about what your boundaries are. And you got to start having conversations about, we really cannot, provide your transportation 5 days a week to the doctor's office, yada, yada, yada. We have to work together. So my friend Stephanie Chong, who's the executive director of Northwest Neighbors Village, gets this and said, you know, there comes a time when what we do does not work, and even temporarily, sometimes members will move into assisted living communities like Grand Oaks with the goal of going back home. But if they also sometimes learn this is something we need to do. So Capitol Hill is the second oldest village in the United States, second only to Beacon Hill in Boston. So we have this longevity. We're living longer, right? So we're going to stay in our homes longer. That works until it doesn't. My friend Mitch Opowski, who owns Synergy Home Care in Arlington, just made a talk to the Senior Services of Alexandria, and I went to hear him speak, and he said what we've learned about care being provided at home is that isolation is not good for us. It's harder to create in the home, and again, when you're in a community, if you're not joining a club, and you stay in your apartment, you still have 3 opportunities every day to have that scaffolding of activity around you. Now, yeah, Janina, that's easy for you to say because you're a super extrovert. But the older I get, I'm an ambivert, and I like to have my time to recharge my batteries. So, independent living. So, the other thing, and this is not a negative or morbid statement, but life can change in a day. And that's what I say to my friend who's retired from the Foreign Service and has moved all over our world. And she says, Janina, I'm coming to Grand Oaks in the fall. I'm like, you hear this, real estate. Okay, can you tell me why? Because the fall. I'm like, okay. She goes, Janina, I'm just kicking the can down the road. I said, I know you are. So she has a plan, but what happens when something happens? So why don't you just come on down? She's already got a deposit down, you know, I want you to come in here. And so with dementia's on the rise, we often have the mentality that, you know, I'm kind of going to wait until he or she declines just a little bit longer, and then she won't really know that we're moving her, and it'll be better that way. Nope. We need to be as functional as possible when we make a change so that we can adapt and have the best life possible with cognitive challenges. So I won't go down the rabbit hole of cognitive challenges, but I am open to talk about that because it does change life, and that's a subject that's very near and dear to me, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. So what I'm seeing is that people are waiting too long, and they're kind of making excuse my vernacular, independent living the new assisted living, and in assisted living, people are coming to us that have higher acuity, is another medical term, and it really isn't what assisted living is created for. So we're pushing the boundaries, all right?
Say more about that. What does that mean? They have higher acuity.
Higher acuity, they have higher needs, and in assisted living, we are not skilled. And there are very specific things we can and cannot do under our licensure. And we need to, Ada and I were talking about this, the ability to make friends sometimes becomes more difficult the older we get. So you want to go in and enjoy about the engagement. Again, we're making these moves to live, not to die.
So Janina, when does somebody make a transition from independent living to assisted? Like, what are the criteria?
Good question. Let's define independent living and assisted living. This might sound master of the obvious, but this sheds light on what you just asked. Independent living is defined as able to care for oneself without the assistance of another. That's why I am not a fan of a couple who are already struggling at home moving into independent living, and the burden is still going to be on the stronger spouse to hold up the other one. Move in while you're still both in good shape. You're still taking trips. You're still going to see your children, and you don't have to worry about the house, right? Assisted living is defined as needing help with activities of daily living, showering, eating, dressing, ambulating, those things. Yeah, and I know you're a nurse. I heard you say, or an NP, yes. Yes.
One of the things about assisted living, if you're considering that, talk to them about the ratio of patient to caregiver.
Yeah.
Because we just had a situation that our daughter-in-law had to be moved because they could not meet her needs.
Yeah. So with that being said, thank you for that comment, and it brings up a very good point. Because we're used to nursing homes and sometimes we get all lumped together and we're very separate. Again, I hope that's a takeaway for you. If you have any gray on what these levels of care are, and again, happy to have private conversations in the Q&A too, we can talk about it. In assisted living, we are not required by law to have ratios. In skilled nursing, we are. And I would ask that you be supportive and encouraging to anyone you know who works in this space, because we have gone through a pandemic and we're struggling with care levels. It is a fact. I'm not trying to be negative, and do not assume, please, that whomever is caring for your loved one is not trying to do a good job. It's really hard. It's hard on the people who are there caring for your daughter-in-law. And I am not excusing anybody not doing their job. I do not manage people in my job, and I'm happy about that. And actually, during the pandemic, I was embedded with our team, helping out, doing a number of things, and I was able to be a cheerleader. And I tried to impress upon them what a privilege it is to care for others. Can you teach people to care? No. Can I say, what would you do if this was your grandmother, your aunt, or your sister, or whatever? They might not have those good relationships in their family, so it was a real eye-opening experience for me to work with people. However, I have seen some heroes. So be encouraging to people who work in our industry at any level. And we're getting back there. I was just mentioning to somebody at Grand Oaks, we've actually just closed down our contract with agency care. And I'm very happy about that, because those people come in, they don't know our people, they don't necessarily know our culture, but they're just coming in and helping us, trying to get the job done. Yes? Yes? Yes, ma'am.
You may address this later, but you mentioned that the CCRC model,
Yes.
that there's a move toward separating out the assisted and the independent from the skilled nursing care. Could you explain a little what you mean by that? You said that you've got independent and assisted, and then the skilled nursing.
And then there's skilled. What we're seeing being built now in the older established continuing care retirement communities like Benson Hall and the Fairfax, they have all 4 levels of that care. Now, the Balfour that is coming in on MacArthur Boulevard in DC, they will not have skilled care. So we're just seeing, I think, because skilled care is so complex. Our healthcare systems are so complex, it is just better to keep it separate. It's become a new model of the CCRC. Not all of that is going away, but newer communities we're seeing that they're not bringing in skilled.
Isn't that kind of critical when you're talking about the continuing step of CC? It takes
Where would they go?
Yeah, they're actually they're actually classes, like Class A, Class B, Class C. We can talk. Yeah, we can do that. Yes. So Sunrise, who is headquartered right here in McLean, actually defined and created really assisted living as we know it today. And it was actually modeled after Terry Clausen's grandmother lived in the Netherlands, and his grandmother lived in a government-subsidized home that helped her stay in her home, and they wanted to create a place that did not feel clinical and sterile and smell like bleach. But just like I said about the care manager who called me about the client who had this stereotype, here he is in his 90s and he still remembers that from when his mother was in her 90s. So we know that engagement is life-giving, and it also happens in assisted living. So assisted living financially, let me move on to assisted living. Assisted living financially is structured very differently. You do pay a community fee, which is usually the equivalent of 1 month's rent. So notice I have said, for both of these levels of care, these are rental models, they are not purchase models. There are purchase models, and one in the area that is a purchase in independent living is Fox Hill, which was created, it's in Bethesda, and we know that people in McLean don't like to go over the bridge to other states. We can talk about that later. I tell my grandmother, like, you drive through 3 states to get to work every day? Sure do. A district in 2 states. The Fox Hill is a horse of a different animal, and the Jefferson in Arlington also has a purchase. You guys are familiar. Great communities. So you pay the equivalent of 1 month's rent. After 30 days, that becomes non-refundable whether you have moved in or not. That money never comes back to you. But we're talking about an investment, if you will, more in the upwards, maybe at the most 12.5 at the top of the scale at Grand Oaks. Your rent pays for most things, but you also pay for medication management. This is an assisted living. I'm talking about medication management, continence care, diabetes services, other if you need them. You are assessed before you come into assisted living. You might not be on what we call a care level. So your rent covers 3 meals a day, weekly housekeeping, weekly laundry, pull cord by the toilet, a push button by the bed, and a pendant that stays on you underneath your clothing, or a wristband where you can call out for help. And then you may need a care level, and at Grand Oaks, it's really not on any of these patented scales. It's about how much time we spend with you. How long does it take to shower Mrs. DiVittorio? How long does it take to help her dress? That might be 15 minutes for some people, and for some people it might be 30. Right? Do we have to take Mrs. DiVittorio down to the dining room for dinner, or can she do that on her own? Right? Many people live in assisted living for what the rent affords. They don't all have a care level. And the other thing that I think is a misnomer about assisted living is, some of you may have been involved in helping loved ones move into assisted living, and you think they can't go out. That is absolutely not true. Just as accountability, we like to know when somebody goes out to the Chevy Chase Club for lunch or wherever they might be going, and then they sign in when they come back in. But if someone wants to walk right out the front door and never come back, there's not anything legally we can do about that. We do not use GPS. And many people who live in assisted living have some level of cognitive impairment. This brings me to a good point. If you or anybody you know is struggling with your memory, it does not mean you're going to be in a memory care unit. Most people at Grand Oaks are happily and well situated in the assisted living portion of our building and not our memory care. That is for people who have advanced cognitive impairment. So,
when does someone move or know it's time to move?
To memory care it is collaborative. We see a change. The family sees a change. Wandering. anyone who has cognitive impairment has the propensity to wander. Do you know how many times I've heard, oh, no, my aunt will not, and she will never wander. Have you seen the silver amber alerts ever come across your phone or out when you're driving on the highway? Yes, it can happen. So, it's collaborative. And it's more one-on-one. Yeah.
I had the opportunity to tour the Sunrise, and
At McLean Garden, the new one, McLean
yes,
Garden.
they do not offer any cooking. Now, for example, like at Vincent Hall, if you're in the independent, you have
Right.
a small kitchen and you can do some, but there is no cooking. So tell me about kind of where that falls in.
Okay, so I don't want to make any accusations. I work for Sunrise. I cut my teeth at Sunrise. If you can work at Sunrise, you can work anywhere. And I'm very glad I had that experience. They actually manage the fairgrounds. What that tells me, Karen, is that in independent living, you can absolutely cook. So perhaps they're trying to kind of market the building as more independent. But if there are no kitchens in there, that's assisted
There's a
living.
refrigerator, yeah.
That's right. We had kitchenettes.
Yeah,
So and for safety,
right.
we have toasters, but not toaster ovens because we don't use open coils. So that's a gray area there.
The other complex I was going to share that you can purchase into, that I understand because I had a client do it, was Goodwin House.
Yes, absolutely, Goodwin House.
Goodwin
Great,
House.
great people. Also Ingleside and DC. These are great organizations. You are very lucky here. Are our prices higher than Chambersburg, Pennsylvania? You better believe it. Most of our residents in assisted living live there until they pass on from this life. Hospice can come, I'm talking about the D word again. Hospice can come right into our building. So what happens if we exceed so we have 3 levels of care in assisted living at Grand Oaks, and what if I exceed those 3 levels of care? Then we have to have a conversation, or you hire a private duty aide. That's your fee on top of, that's a fee you pay on top of what you're paying Grand Oaks. Long-term care insurance, let's talk about that for a minute. If you have a policy, and thank goodness the government did offer this to their employees. Some of you may remember a number of years ago, and I think it's more common in this area in the upper geriatric generation than it is in other parts of the country because our government is here and they gave a good deal on it. Premiums have gone up. Does anybody know that? And then I get asked all the time, okay, Janita, I'm all set. Do I need to keep paying that high premium on my long-term care insurance policy on top of my rental fee that you still pay in independent living? You pay that big fee, but you're going to pay you're going to pay rent for your apartment with the real estate mentality that location matters and that size matters, right? Please become intimately acquainted with what your long-term care policy does. Call your agent who sold that to you and made commission off of it and get him or her to explain it to you. They are all different. So, when you're at Grand Oaks and you have a long-term care policy, yeah, they're just going to reimburse like Medicare does. No. You pay Grand Oaks and then Genworth or whomever your issuer is pays you back. Do I see Medicare covering any part of assisted living anytime soon? Absolutely not. Where your Medicare and your secondary insurance is mobilized in an independent living community, if you go into therapy or an assisted living, is in the therapy suite. Where on site at Grand Oaks we have physical therapy, occupational therapy, cognitive therapy, and speech therapy. And the wonderful folks who work with these teams, and ours is contracted with a company called Legacy, they actually take care of that paperwork for you. So long-term care. it works. So what we have to do is basically, when you move in independent living, we qualify what services we're providing for that person with that issuer so that they will pay, so that they will reimburse you. So I have a friend whose in-laws live in Ingleside and King Farm, that's in Rockville. She has cognitive impairment and her husband wants to take care of her in the same space. He knows he has the option for her to go to memory care, but he is utilizing their long-term care policy to pay for her private duty so that he can have a life and he can participate in activities. So let me talk about that a minute. Another good thing about being in a CCRC or an assisted living community is that if your spouse has to move to another unit that better serves his or her needs, for example, advanced cognitive impairment, you are on the property where you can go see your spouse and spend as much time as you want to with him or her without getting in your car. And ladies and gentlemen, we live in Washington, D.C. My daughter, Lizzie, and I were talking about her license. Oh, Lord. I grew up in rural North Carolina, getting your license in D.C. Please don't drive your car longer than you need to. Uber works. And there's a great service called Go Grandparent.
Okay.
They deliver groceries, they have a service fee, and you don't have to use a smartphone to call them. Yeah, that's just a little bit of Janina's evangelism and part of my energy in my body about my father-in-law driving his car. So are we clear kind of on the difference between a CCRC and assisted living? I would say the greatest segment, I had this conversation with one of my care manager colleagues this week, the fastest growing segment of assisted living are group homes.
Yes.
And you have some great ones here, Eden and Larmax. They're my friends. The owners of Larmax Homes are two girls, two women who went through this with their mothers. And they got really smart, and they're really amazing entrepreneurs, and they know the drill. And these are smaller, usually 8 people max in a home. But if you move in as a couple at Grand Oaks, you pay a second person fee, which is $2,000 on top of the rent of that apartment. In a group home like a Larmax home or an Eden home, you're going to pay double. Just so you know. People don't know what they don't know. So please call me about this stuff. And if you need someone you want to talk to in a particular community, call them, because chances are I know them or I'm acquainted with them.
Where are these two places located?
Larmax, so in Larmax, you know, I've got to go. They build homes. I've been to, they have a concentration in McLean. And Eden is more Montgomery County. I know Larmax has one out on 7 Lodge Road, not too far from me, but check them out.
There's, Janina, there's 2, I think, Larmaxes that are right at
like Louisville
like Springville and
Yes.
Louisville.
Yes, Louisville,
Like if
yes.
you know where the community or the Fairfax Community Center is,
Yeah.
they're literally like catty corner
Yeah.
on Louisville.
Right.
And there are 2 of them, they're side by side.
Right.
2 separate houses.
Lizzie?
Potomac House and Avalon in Chesterbrook Woods, and there's
Yes.
so many neighborhoods in Fairfax County, and you wouldn't even know that the group home was there.
Yes, and there's a stigma, and let's call out the elephant in the room. That McLean Gardens building, you know how long they've been fighting about putting that out here? For years, because we don't want that in our neighborhood. You know, I remember one of our colleagues at KW McLean had a house in the Bronner Street area.
Oh, so
And I went in there, and I said, this is the perfect house for a group home. Just put some elevators in here. But during the pandemic, we had a resident who moved out. His family moved him out so they could go see him. They didn't have to be governed under, some of the protocols. It's a totally different environment. Obviously, there's much more one-on-one. I think Larmax has an incredible equestrian program for residents there. But I love homes in neighborhoods because of engagement and because of intergenerational activity. Please spend time with people who are younger than you are and older than you are, because you are missing out if you don't do that. And church is the perfect place to do that, like we're doing today. Yes?
Sometimes are not advertised.
Right.
Because when we lived in our big house, they converted a ranch into a group home in our neighborhood, Cobdale, Fairfax City. We didn't even know it was there until the ranch went.
And that's actually the way it should be, because there should be no stigma. And actually, if you know anyone who, there are need-based, there are places under the assisted living umbrella that entertain people who do not have the resources to do that. There is one in Bethesda, if you know of anybody, and usually these are private owners that own like 4 or 5 homes. Please call me.
There's one in McLean.
We're really, really lucky here what we have. Let me see.
Janina, we were going to have, I introduced Aida to the Potomac Concierge ladies.
Yeah, and we have her next.
Yeah.
Let me just close out what I said, and then we'll do a QA. Please do not make your decision in a vacuum. Please do not. Reach out to me, talk to other people who have been through this. One thing before I go, this is a tribute to Karen. What books am I reading? What's on my nightstand, and what do I think you should have on your nightstand? Karen did a talk on this book, The Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. He is an incredible physician. He is absolutely relevant, and he wrote a book called Being Mortal. Everyone should read this book. The other one is Sky Above Clouds, written by 2 people whom I know. One of them was in a terrible diagnosis when he and his wife wrote this together about how aging, there are things that are better as you get older, and it does a deep dive into that. And the other one is about longevity. My friend Bradley Sherman, The Super Age. Karen, you have to read this book. She'll have it read probably tomorrow. Karen's Bookworm. Decoding Our Demographic Destiny. I'll have these more afterwards. And I did not put those in the resource list, but they are great books that are relevant and talk about, and this one's not entirely about aging, but it addresses a lot of stuff about population. I'm a sociology major. So please, I can't stress to you that these 3 books are great things for you to read to age enthusiastically.
Okay.
Okay, right.
So I will echo about the waiting. Very dear couple in our church lived in a townhome and in Evans Mill Pond, and she couldn't do the stairs anymore, and then he couldn't do the stairs anymore, and he was caring for her. And they wanted to be together, married 60 plus years. They were able to get into Vincent Hall very quickly, fortunately, and she was able to pass with him. But if that had to happen, they would have been together. I'm just gonna cry because it was hard. So now he's in Vincent Hall, and she also felt good knowing where he was going to be. She wanted to know he was okay, and so I'll just share that story. The other thing that I found since the pandemic, and again, I have elderly parents. My dad's turning 90 on Tuesday, and we just went to go see him. And he is in very good health, but my mother's not, and she is wearing him out. So it is a concern. They will probably be very committed to not leaving their house, even though I have had the conversation. So I'm just going to say it from the child side. But the stairs. In the pandemic, a lot of people didn't feel like they could make a move, and we are seeing more people that are feeling like, okay, now I need to start making decisions, perhaps even delayed. But I have 2 clients, one that went to the Goodwin House, the other one went to Richmond to be near their children. Both of them, every time they went up and down those stairs, to me, it was very concerning about one fall, right? It would be like, and their bedrooms were upstairs, so it really wasn't a choice, although I'll say there are always choices, but it was going to be hard choices. So the other thing that we hear a lot when we are talking with our clients, particularly people who lived in their home for a long time, is what do we do with everything?
It's all about the stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just went through the what do we do about everything myself. And there is generationally, the greatest generation, you know, they have a lot of possessions that are meaningful. I'm not saying every generation doesn't, but I just know from my parents. And then their children don't necessarily want it. Like, for example, I don't have any room for my parents' things because I just love to get rid of my things. And my two children who are adults do want my things. So how am I going to get them to take my parents' things? And so there is I don't want to say a plot, but we have an oversupply, I'm sure you're going to slide it, oversupply of stuff. And so we've got the ladies from Potomac Concierge who have worked with many of our clients and helping to navigate that. So they're just going to share a little bit. We're going to do some Q&A. So if I could welcome you all up here.
Thank you, Karen and Lizzie, for including us. I'm Lena Medell, this is my associate, Lauren and Lorana, and our company is Potomac Concierge.
Can you
You're going to need to talk loud. Yeah, I'll get closer.
You can pull it up. It says that I speak too softly, but if you ask my family, they would not agree. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a certified senior move manager, and what that means is that we help people make the transition from a home that you've been in for a number of years where there's a lot of accumulation, and you have the space so you don't really feel the need to do anything until it's time to move. And it's always better to do it ahead of time rather than waiting and having your children stuck with it. Basically, we just go through a process. We don't make anybody get rid of anything that they don't want to. We just look at where you're going, see what you have, what's meaningful to you, and then with the rest of the items, we try to honor the memory, but not necessarily keep everything. I think that everybody has questions about the stuff, and I'm happy to answer them for anybody or any other questions about our process, but we can facilitate your move from starting with just going through the decluttering part, managing a mover, helping decide and organize where things go, and with the things that are going with you, but also the other items that are not going with you. That, as Karen said, kids don't want anything. They're minimalists. And it's hard. It's hard to get rid of those things. Most people, one of the hardest things people have trouble getting rid of are their books. And there's very little room for books. LPs are also becoming a thing that people don't necessarily want to part with. But that's really the major part. So to answer any questions.
Do you do anything with estate sales?
Excuse me?
Estate sales.
State sales, state sales right now they're a lot of different models, and they really want you to have at least 75% of your home left, because they need to use a lot of resources. They have to get an appraiser in there, the better ones, to make sure that they don't sell something that's priceless that no one's aware of. And so you need to be leaving a fair amount of items there. And typically they want to net about $10,000. Gross $10,000 and that kind of stuff. But if you look, and I always say eBay is the greatest predictor of market price these days. If you look at completed sales, you can see what your treasures are worth. And it's also good to have the estate sale after you move out. Take what you want, leave, and then do it.
Ada, so many people are concerned about what actually happens to their furniture and things like that when they work with a company like you. Do you sell them for them, or do you direct them to third parties that can do that for them?
We work with a company, several different companies, but my current favorite is one called Goodbye Hello, and it's online, and they come in and they photograph your item, they tell you what they can sell it for, it goes online, somebody buys it online, and then they just tell you somebody will be there on Tuesday to pick it up, and it's 50-50. That's a good place too to look to see what things are selling for. But honestly, in my opinion, don't get bogged down in this stuff. Your asset is your home. Make the timing work to put that on the market if you're selling at the right time versus worrying about an estate sale or all these other things. Consider the tax deduction. And as far as things that are not sold, things that are donated, there's a lot of very good organizations. We like Wider Circle. They have the lowest overhead of any charity I've ever been involved with. And they're just great. And they take everything and they can put for $450, they can set up an apartment.
What's it called?
Wider Circle. You're based in Maryland. They're great, but they also have a truck and they'll come and pick it up. But it's going to typically it takes about 2 months because they only have one truck.
They're a little bit of a backlog, a little bit slower now, things like this because of the pandemic. I think
Right.
so. Yeah.
Question?
Oh, I actually just want to sing her praises because she has worked with a number of clients at the HBC group, but two in particular that come to mind. You have no idea what stuff looks like. I mean, the last client she worked with was someone who had, worked all over the world. I walked into his house and it was like walking into a museum. Seriously, it was the most amazing. Like everywhere you looked, there was something incredibly, incredibly special that either he or his wife, who had passed, had collected in their work and in their travels. And they worked tirelessly with this gentleman to honor all of that stuff, to pack it up, to make sure that he felt great in that move. And once he got into his new house, I think you guys kind of helped him there as well. So it's like no amount of stuff is too much for these ladies. They are truly amazing at what they do. And I like to say that it's part organizing, part packing, and part therapy as well.
Absolutely. That's true.
Well, yes, and I forgot to say that typically what we'll do is, all of our people are organizers, so when you go to your new location, we will unpack everything and organize it and put it away.
You work with for digitizing things like pictures on the wall and
Yes, great
recordings.
point. A lot of people have so many photos, and they're either in boxes or in albums. Do you ever pull it out to look at it? No. So my favorite thing right now for photos is just get a digital frame, digitize it. I have mine in my kitchen. I see pictures of my babies, and my family and vacations every day because it just scrolls through.
Do you have resources if one is not digital?
Yes, we have associates that do that.
Ada and I were just talking about a new platform, and actually it is on because I work with clients in independent living, I used to hear all kinds of excuses. And no matter what people said to me, it was about the stuff. That they became paralyzed by, what am I going to do? And Ada and Libby and I are actually good friends, it's collaborative, we shared stories. Do not make a move like this without, it's a relationship preserver too. We talked about that. This is a tense time for you and your children, and to your point, Karen, about your kids not wanting your stuff, I call them the crate and barrel generation. And my grandfather's like, that is some cheap, they don't make, I'm kind of old school about some stuff. My husband tried to tell me that I should sell one instead of my grandmother's china on eBay, and I'm like, no! There is a new platform out there called Artifacts, and it is not misspelled, it's on your resource list, and it's a way to catalog things. And so, Ada and I and Libby, I'm sure we talked about this. What we don't want to get rid of, and thank you for letting me to share this passion. What we don't want to lose are memories. So if we record our stories, there have been studies done about this, we record our stories and we disseminate our things or you have these great platforms. And a good friend of mine actually is a marketer for artifacts. Check them out and go online and look at it. Once you know the memories are recorded, it mobilizes you to do what is best for you to live a good life and be aging enthusiastically. It is the stuff. I used to hear some stories in my office. We would keep logs about the excuses we would hear. and it's a choice, let me say that. I'm an evangelist for aging enthusiastically, and I think you have to think outside the box in the way you've always lived to make life easier so that you can spend your time engaging and making memories with your family and the people you care about rather than worrying about the punch list.
Actually, in my family now, we do not give gifts. Only to like little children.
Right.
Holiday time, we could take a trip together or do something together, rather than stuff.
Yeah. So I would say that we have better resources, and I can also give a huge plug to my friends at Potomac Concierge. They do other things besides moving and organizing, and they had a client who lived in Grand Oaks in memory care. And what I observed is beautiful. They had been helping this gentleman for a very long time with his paperwork and managing his life. And then when it came time when life truly changed for him, there was a relationship in place where there was integrity-based trust. He trusted Libby and Ada doing things for him because they had a relationship. So Potomac Concierge can actually do things for you before you actually are considering a move. And I like that because you get to know each other and we do business with people we know, like, and trust. How are you? Yeah. So the people, to me, are like, my children can do this, Janina, they can come in and pack my stuff. Callie and Drew can come in, they can get all this stuff done. No, they'll come back and they're like, Janina, are you going to give up some fee and come to do it? Yes, but keep your why out there. Keep your end game out there, right? They come back to me and they're like, Janina, we really should listen to you about, I didn't get rid of the things that Ada told me that I should have, this is just really not going to work in here. And this lady at the Fairfax Living Cottage came back to me and she said, Janina, every morning I get up when I want to go play bridge with my friends in the clubhouse, and this pile of stuff is sitting there staring at me. I didn't do enough. But you know what she told me? Her parents, she's French and I love her. Her parents had a home in the Pyrenees Mountains. And some of these things were reminiscent of her time there, and she didn't want to get rid of them because she was afraid she was going to lose the memories. So, hire somebody to help you with this process, and it's okay to do it gradually. Start working on it. Well, I don't need to do that now. Yeah. You need to just kind of start working on it so you don't get overwhelmed, and overwhelmed creates being paralyzed in making decisions.
Do you have any resources for someone evaluating what you have, if it's valuable or not?
So we use fleshers.
Yeah,
If you're inside the beltway, they'll come to you. If you're outside the beltway,
Can't hear me.
they'll come to you. Fleshers on
Use the mic, please. Microphone.
Hello, okay. Fleshers, and they will come out. If you're inside the beltway, I don't think there's a charge, but if it's outside the beltway, it's a nominal, like $100 or something. I haven't checked that lately, it might have changed if it's like a whole house, but if you have things, individual things, you can go on their website, you take a picture of it, give them as much information as you have, and send it to them, and they'll get back to you with what they think the hammer price would be.
WESCHLER.
Are they still in DC?
They moved to Rockville.
Yeah, and then there's Quinn's also. We have our preferences. Quinn's has been around a long time there in Falls Church. But you guys.
But also, this other gal, Michelle Baldwin from Goodbye Hello.
Yeah.
She can also, she's pretty good if it's furniture, she can give you a pretty good idea. I had a piece of a sculpture, I don't even remember how I got it, and I showed it to a person that sold artwork, and they couldn't figure out who the sculptor was. And I said, Michelle, can you take a look at this? And somehow she found it. So she's very resourceful.
Yeah, I think this because we are living longer, and you would be surprised at the resources that are out there in place. Like I told you about Go Grandparent. Just ask. That's why you got Ada. That's why you got Karen, Lizzie, Jenny. They've all had experience.
Just kind of a question / comment. One of the questions that I hear when I talk to people who are in this process quite often is how much storage is available in an independent living place. Some may or may not have
We call that a deferred decision.
That's a question that is asked sometimes. Like, what do you do with all your Christmas decorations when you're not at Christmas and things like those? Those are questions that I've heard. So
from a community standpoint, at the Fairfax, in assisted living, it's really not. You might want to ask, like, we might hold a piece of furniture for you until your children are going to come and get it. If we have to do something to adapt to ability. At the Fairfax, we had very small. This is funny. We had very small, like, storage. I saw people do very creative things. You hire a California closet. You maximize your space. And it was really interesting because a lot of these couples were military and they move all over the place and they know how to deal with their stuff. They just know how to do it. And to Ada's point, if you can, speaking of Karen's word, stress meter, make this move and then take care of your house later. You do not have to sweep yourself out the door because you are going to put yourself through a very hard time. Go get your place, your new place situated, and then the showings and the open houses and all those things. Now, staging, that's a whole question. But I want you to move first because I think it's the best way to move. Do you agree, Kaya? Mm-hmm. And then, so at the Fairfax, because these are people who are military and they travel all over the world and they have their monkeypox in Vietnam and their magic from Thailand. And I have this, the storage company that's closest to the Fairfax, they should have paid me commission. Because they're like, and they go out there and pilfer in their stuff, but I had a client, that stuff that was out there in that storage unit just ate at her every day. And she would want to go out there and check on it. So I'm like, Ada, that mentally is not.
Yeah, not a good one.
It's not.
It just wears you down.
It does. It takes your energy. And then the other thing that these folks can do for you is like you're going from 4, like Karen and Andy just made a right size. You need to know what fits in your space. And about my friend Monique, they tried to tell me this was not all going to fit in here. And I said, you want to be able to move around. So it's not that maybe temporarily I'm averse to a storage space, but like I think the stuff needs to be dealt with from the outset so that you can spend your time aging and having fun and being engaged, enthusiastic.
Yeah. Well, one thing we like to do is take brown craft paper, cut out the size of the furniture that you're thinking of taking, and just go and tape it down on the floor. And if you don't do that, you'd say, oh yeah, that'll work. But then you realize, if you ever have to use a walker, if you break your foot or something, you're not going to be able to maneuver around your new space.
You guys, this is another funny story. I had this physician who sent his children this very elaborate spreadsheet where he had listed all the things he thought they were going to take, and he was already thinking about how are we going to settle the conflict on who wants what. His children and his grandchildren sent the spreadsheet back to him empty.
Yeah.
So I think if there is something special, Amy, you can attest to this, like the dining room table, that was always a big thing. You're going to eat most of your meals in the dining room. When you're independent living, you can cook, but they took pictures of it. They had like a last hurrah at their house. And this artifacts platform, a way to kind of keep the story. There's even things on their grandmother's biscuit recipes. It's about the memories. And then it frees them up. It frees you up to live your life and not worry about your stuff.
Yeah. Any more questions with these two experts?
You clarified the benefit of planning in advance. If for whatever reason one chooses to live independent, financially, and then suddenly there's a need for nursing care. Two questions. Is it beneficial to look into this in advance because situations change? Quality of care, etc.
Right.
And what are good resources for identifying someone that's quickly available?
Aging is on your resource list. They're called wedding planners for growing older. Aging life care managers. Yes, you can still shop communities in skilled care and kind of know, you're right, you're kind of at the mercy of the staff at the time that you would be moving there. But an aging life care manager can help you because they have those relationships in place with skilled communities where they can help get you to the place that is best for you.
What about something like Place for Mom or the Medicare list of nursing homes? Are those useful resources?
Not to bash anyone, I'm not a Place for Mom fan.
Okay. What about the Medicare list?
Well, Medicare, again, I'm not a skilled guru. Medicare, CMS governs all skilled nursing, so I'm not sure that list has any preference. And then they have, there are these, like, rating systems, just like hotels, 1 star, 5 star. There's a whole, we are in the people-pleasing business, and there's a whole lot of subjectivity in that. So if you needed to make a move to skilled care, you want a clinical, like caseworker, social worker, which a life care manager would be, who can make these decisions based on what care you need and not what the reputation is in the community. The person who has the relationships with the people inside of the community, that's who, and that way you're getting kind of an objective third party, if you will. But when you're making a decision like this about where you want to go, try to do it proactively. I like to be in control. I used to tell my customers is I like to be in control. So I want you making the decisions. This is not a morbid statement, it's reality. You make the decisions while you're in control and you can make your own decisions. Not let somebody else do it for you.
Yeah. Elder care attorney, is that a specialty? Suppose there's nobody in your area.
I'm happy to call time if you need to, and I will talk to you about elder care attorneys. I'm not in a hurry, and I'll answer your questions, but I want to be on.
Janina is fully available to speak after today, so yeah. Thank you so much, you all. We are so grateful to have you today, and I hope that you've taken away some information that is helpful.
Thank you.
And we're all available for any questions. You have our contact information in the folder, and we'd be happy to be of service. Thank you.
Thank you.